Stores la.
Sir, while we are free, can you suggest some books, sir, for good reading, like course related, if possible?
You mean like general books or subject books?
Subject books for now. General books you are anyways sending, right?
Anyway, subject books, anyway, I have indicated in my lecture schedule. Huh?
Those only, na, sir? Okay.
Yeah. Marketing Management by Philip Kotler. Then Essentials of Management by what is his name? Essentials of Management, Poons and Donald. And then Operations Management by Chase and Aquila. These three are good for this.
Okay, sir, thank you.
In fact, like this Operations Management book, which I am describing, that is also useful when you take an elective like PPC, Production Planning and Control. Okay, so but I would prefer that you read the textbooks. Like see, reading textbooks is always gives you an edge to over people who just depend on lecture notes and video lectures, because it cannot be possible for a faculty to cover every sentence of the textbook. So anyways, it is better you, and that too now, you know, most of the information is available in Google. So getting a electronic copy of it is not a difficult job. So, but and here, as far as possible, buy pop, copyrighted material instead of just trying to depend on pirated versions. We have to respect the author. See, when he is sharing his knowledge, you have to acknowledge his contributions by being some quality. See, one of the reasons for why we have not, as a country, why we have not progressed much is because we don't respect copyrights. Like we try to freely download A.R. Rahman's songs. We try to freely download some textbooks. Try to just we don't respect trade crafts. See, in way back in 1776 itself, you enacted a paper. That's why there is a tremendous amount of creativity. Whereas we have started patenting systematically our inventions in as late as 1990s. So we are almost 200 years behind in terms of patenting system. We never believed in patents. For some time we believed in process patents, not product patents. But anyway, thanks to GATT agreement, for which India has also signed, so we are now we are in the we are in the process of patenting everything, and in fact, like now everyone is trying to patent their ideas. That is a good development. It is a because patenting system brings in a bit of transparency. That means, like for example, what we mean by transparency means, like if you want to patent your idea or product patent, you have to disclose the entire details of that, and government takes this responsibility of protecting your contribution if somebody tries to copy that idea, unless the patent holder shares that idea for a, in terms of maybe ultimately he might decide that I believe in copyleft. I'm going to give the my patent freely. See, just like Linux. If you take Linux, Linus Torvalds, who invented Linux, he believed in copyleft. That means he didn't believe in copyright. So that's why Linux is free. But what happens is sharing of software code is a bit okay. Product patents, like one of the toughest things in patent why patents are necessary is patents are particularly very important, particularly in pharmaceutical sciences, because to develop a molecule, develop a drug, particular disease, right? They invest a lot of money, research. Sometimes the strike rate is 1 in 100. That means if they develop 100 molecules for treating a particular virus or disease, virus, bacteria, they end up striking 1 out of 100. So all that investment has to be secured in the form of patents. So the patenting, whereas software patenting or maintaining, it depends on the individual. Like, see, after all, this is mostly intellectual exercise, software. So if like people like Linus Torvalds, so he believed in copyleft, and he gave the code of Linux to everybody, whoever is asking. Similarly, the father of modern internet. Can anyone guess like who is the father of modern internet? Hmm? Hello? Are you with me or not, kids?
Tim Berners-Lee, sir.
Tim Berners-Lee, he believed in copyleft. He believed in copyleft, and he gave all those protocols to everybody. HTTP, HTML, all these. Similarly, TCP/IP also is a copyleft one. Who developed TCP/IP? Who developed TCP/IP? which is the protocol that is that is possible, that is reason for you and me chatting on this online class. The underlying protocol of you and myself talking freely over the internet is the TCP/IP protocol, and the inventor who is part of that DARPA project in US, Vinton Cerf. Vinton Cerf is the guy who wrote all the code. But anyway, because it is a government aided development, so US government said like it is available for free. But whereas Microsoft or every other software, they believed in copyright, because after all they have made a lot of investment and they have to recover their investment in developing the code. So it is okay. So what I mean to say is, most of the you can say like you are the luckiest generation, because information is at your fingertips. Whatever information you want, it is available in a fraction of a second. And again, in this respect, we should thank those young kids, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, who are just around 40-45 years, and they have done wonders, right? By creating such a infrastructure in terms of Google and whatnot. They have created fantastic products. Anyway, so now coming to our present, so the modern period of mass production is dominated by Henry Ford's mass production system, right? And because, as I told you yesterday in the last class, that this mass production system has created a kind of a paradigm shift in manufacturing, because it simplifies the assembly of a product, right? Using a moving assembly line concept. So whatever the mass production system that Henry Ford invented in 1903 or 1907, because he took almost 4 years to fine tune his mass production system, it led to a kind of situation where even an ordinary farmer in US could afford to buy his car, and at the same time his own workers could buy the same car, because he was paying salaries, wages at such a high level that they could afford to buy the car they were manufacturing. Similarly, like so as I told you now, like if we have to name a perfect entrepreneur, you can say Henry Ford is the perfect entrepreneur, because he created a win-win situation. He gave a affordable car to everybody. He paid highest wages to the workers, irrespective of how the others are paying the wages to the workers, and he made a lot of money. Like he became a billionaire during that time. So anyway, so that's why like an ideal entrepreneur is the one who makes everyone who is part of a enterprise to be winners, just like
except the opposition.
Huh?
Except the competitors, sir.
Except the
competitors in the market, competition.
now competition. See, like what is your competition in the sense like he didn't what do you call, through rowdyism or some kind of back end operations. He didn't do any such kind of mischief.
No, sir, you are saying everyone gets profited. I'm saying except the competitors who are competing
No, see,
in the industry. For example, Henry Ford's cars were cheaper, so other car companies might be at loss, right?
see, markets doesn't believe in that. As long as you can deliver a better product, people will buy. No, it is not like. See, that's why I told you about the quotation of Adam Smith. What Adam Smith said: every business is driven by his selfishness. That is making money. But in the process, if he is saving some time or expenditure for the customers, that is good now. See, you can't you competitor. See, that is the beauty of markets. Who like whereas in countries like India, we have what is so called crony capitalism. Crony capitalism is directly or indirectly government will support certain individual, certain businessman, like maybe like Adani or Ambani, right? So like but in US that kind of government support is not there. It is purely based on one's, you can say, geniusness or creativity. If you are able to outsmart your competitor through your own creativity, that is perfect. There is nothing wrong. You know, like for example, initially Yahoo was a very popular search engine, but Google fellow has come up with a very very better search engine. It was it was outsmarted by Google, and Google continues to churn out better products. Even Google Chrome, which was in fact our Android OS that Google has come up with for cell phones, for which Android is the product for which Sundar Pichai is responsible. That's why Sergey Brin and Larry Page have rewarded Sundar Pichai by giving CEO position because he has developed Android in such a beautiful way. It became the most popular OS with regard to cell phones, even outsmarting Nokia's
Microsoft.
Microsoft. So, that is the beauty of competition. So, an existing he like Android, Google people are now putting lot of pressure on Microsoft and other people, even Apple, by coming with fantastic products with a lot of innovation there, right? So, uh, so Henry Ford, in a way, created a win-win situation. See, in markets, what happens is markets are also similar to what we find in wars, right? Different. See, the only difference between war and business is, whereas in wars you see lot of bloodshed and destruction of assets, but in business also you outsmart your competitor by by through better innovation, and you can like only thing is here we don't, it may not result in destruction of the assets. See, if you like if they have to you see like a lot of destruction is happening in Syria, right? Assets are being bombarded because you don't like your enemy. But in business is you don't. There is also war in business, but here you are outsmarting through a better innovation. See, you may not. There is no economic per se any destruction. See, economic destruction is not there in business. Only thing is it results in better and better what do you call systems in which you try to increase the standard of living of people. Again, we have to take the quotation of Adam Smith. He says, every businessman is led by an invisible hand towards an end which is not part of his end. That what is that end? Is raising the standards of living of people. So no businessman will think in that kind of lofty goal. But he will help in achieving that without even that he may not be thinking that he's helping the society, but he's only thinking about how to survive in the market through better innovation and deliver a better product so that people will buy his product and they will not buy his competitors' products. So that drives. But he never thinks that he's helping the society. You know, there are very few people like only in voluntary organizations like Akshay Patra or whatever it is. Their goal itself is to serve the people. Okay, but in a pure business environment, so in a pure business environment, like you can survive only when you innovate. I told you now, three letters are very important in any business. What is that? Three letters? Any guess? Productivity,
PQI,
productivity, quality,
quality.
Innovation.
innovation. So you have to keep on improving your efficiency of your manufacturing process. You have to improve the quality, robustness of the products, and then innovation. Because Kodak has not innovated in camera, it has become extinct. Whereas Canon, its competitor, it took a timely decision to diversify. That is, it went into office equipment manufacturing, like copier equipment, printers, so many diversified, and so that's why they could survive. So innovation is important, diversification is important because nowadays one of the biggest nuisance values in business is the rate of obsolescence is also high. So you have to be always on your toes. That's why I told you about that Intel founders quotation. That is one of the founders, Andrew Grove. Andrew Grove, what he said is only paranoid survive. Means only who are fear of that I may be outsmarted. Only those guys and who doing innovation, they will only survive. Right? Others have to give away to other people who have more innovative capacities. But anyway, so now coming to Henry Fayol's 14 principles, this is you can say this man Henry Fayol, he is a great father figure in management theory. Like he's a French mining engineer, so he contributed the so-called 14 principles of management, and he is the only exception who is coming from Europe. But otherwise, most of the people we are going to discuss as part of evolution of management theory, they have mainly come. They have come from American continent, like Henry Ford, Frank Gilbert, Henry Gantt. No, all these are from the American continent, USA, particularly United States of America. So here, so before we uh, get into rotary fuel, yeah. Anyway, we will go one by one. We have Frank Gilbert. He is another giant of a personality in mechanical engineer. And then Henry Gantt. Henry Gantt is another person who invented a tool called Gantt chart, so which is useful for scheduling and loading, right? And the during the same period, like people have come up with what is so-called functions of management. So this is so these are the some of the important people and milestones that are part of 20th century. Like now we have contemporary management like operations research, social psychology, ergonomics. So anyway, we will come one by one. So let us first of all let us start with the father figure of scientific management. That is at the fag end of industrial revolution. That means this Taylor. We are going to talk about something about Taylor. Taylor, his full name is Frederick Winslow Taylor. Frederick Winslow Taylor. He is called as father of scientific management, and in fact, we can proudly say that he belongs to our community, that is mechanical engineering community. In fact, that's why in most of the engineering institutions, like say NITs, IITs, when it is a question of like who should handle industrial management or management courses, people normally by default they give that responsibility to the mechanical engineering department. Part of the reason is this guy's contribution. He's a, I think, Taylor, F.W. Taylor, he's a very interesting personality in the sense he's not only a great technology innovator, but he is also did innovation in management also. Looking at his technology innovation, can you guess like what is the kind of technology he innovated in mechanical engineering? F.W. Taylor. Any guess? Frederick Winslow Taylor, one of the greatest tool he invented for mechanical engineering is the HSS tool, high speed steel tool. So, like 1841R, that composition. So, if you take Taylor's that HSS tool, you know what is the beauty of that HSS tool? It has increased the productivity of a cutting tool by 16 times. Previously, people were using various kind of cutting tools in the machining of metals. Lathe. While in those days, see, I am talking about Taylor's era. So actually, Taylor mainly contributed his most of the ideas in around 1890s. So in 1890s, that's why I have to bring him in the 18th and the 19th century. He has appeared in the scene in late 1890s, and one of the contributions of Taylor is like he invented this HSS tool, high-speed steel tool. Like, and he ended up like in order to invent this HSS tool, he did a lot of experimentation. In fact, to arrive at that combination of 18:4 is to 1. I think 18. What is 18? Any idea?
Titanium, sir.
Have you studied Taylor's
Titanium
HSS tool?
when
Huh?
18% is titanium, sir.
Tungsten, I think so, sir. 18%.
Tungsten, sir. Tungsten.
Tungsten 1,4.
1 is vanadium.
4 is
Chromium.
chromium, right? See, this perfect, in order to arrive at this perfect combination, he did a lot of metallurgical experimentation, changing the constituents of the HSS tool, and in the process, and also he is also known for coming with estimating the tool life of a cutting tool. You know, Taylor's tool life equation. In order to do both of them, it seems he has machined around 300 tons of steel. That means steel, 3 lakh kilograms of steel. You know how much perseverance he has. That is not a simple job, na. Like, whereas if you go to first year workshop, if you recall your first year workshop, you might have only machined around 10 grams or 50 grams of steel to do that thread cutting or grooving. But this guy, he has so much patience in experimentation that he ended up doing this 300 tons of steel he machined in the process. So he is such a great man. But at the same time, he's not only a technology genius, he's also a management genius. In the sense, like just like he is like a Charles Babbage, you know. Charles Babbage, he laid the foundation of beauty of standard, going for beauty of standardization. And at the same time, that guy he also invented the mechanical computer. Similarly, Taylor also did a wonderful job. So, this is the technology side contribution of Taylor. Whereas if you take Taylor, what his contribution to management is, you can say like he is the father of scientific management. Father of scientific management means why we have to give such a great title is because, see, if you have to
He's
call
good in both
somebody
science
as
and management.
huh?
He's genius in both science and management.
No. Regarding functions, no. Actually, function concept was brought in by Henry Fayol. Whereas, what is the why we had to give such a great title? See, you don't call somebody as father of something. Like, say, if you have given a title of father of economics to Adam Smith, because he did a lot of contribution to theory of economics. He has come up with that concept of division of labor, how it ends up increasing the productivity of a industry. Then he came up with that the what constitutes the wealth of a nation. Right. Similarly, here Taylor was given a title of father of scientific management because He is the first man to measure what is the fair day's work of a worker. Because till that time, nobody knew how to measure a human work, how to quantify the manual labor of a worker. In fact, till this time, even you would not have even imagined how I can allocate a work to a worker, manual work particularly. Anyway, you, a work which involves, let us say, coding and everything. So, in fact, like that is not at a solved problem. We will not go into that discussion. Whereas when it comes to how to quantify what is the fair day's work of a manual laborer, a worker who is on sitting in a industrial floor, how you decide? Prior to Taylor, it was based on some rules, hunch. It depends on the relation between the supervisor and the worker. So there was no systematic analysis of human work. But Taylor is the first man to bring in some kind of scientific approach to measure human work. Like, for example, prior to Taylor, people were following their own way of using a particular tool, how much quantity a worker can lift per day. It is all depends on bargaining power between supervisor and the worker. There was no way to analyze human work. So you may be wondering how this guy ended up doing this. Even though he's a technologist, like he developed two life equation and then he invented this HSS tool. And he also a very good tennis player. He ended up even designing a good tennis racket, a novel tennis racket. He did a lot of innovation. One of the reasons why Taylor ended up doing this analysis of human work was actually there is a small detour to why he ended up doing this. Actually, Taylor is a F.W. Taylor is a very studious man. But he studied, he read a lot of books. But at some point of time, doctors have recommended him not to read any books because he is losing his eyesight. So what his physician advised him is don't read too much, and he was advised to take a kind of work which doesn't involve too much table work or reading. So even though he got admission into the elite business school then existing, or like Harvard University, but he was forced to go as a worker, machinist in a company called Bethlehem Steel Company, or Midwell or Bethlehem. There is a bit of confusion regarding which company exactly. So he joined as a machinist uh, in a what do you call in the steel company, where his job is to using lathe. He has to turn out some some components. All right. So what he found is there actually he was not directly put on lathe. He was actually put on a work which involves a lot of transfer of lot of material from one place to another. Like for example, in this Midwell Steel Company, one of the major portion of work is they used to make steel, and it needs raw materials like pig iron, then rice, wheat husk, and then limestone. Look, different materials were being used to make that steel. So Taylor actually he was observing all these things, how people are working on the shop floor. There he found in his observation that most of the workers are deliberately reducing the amount of work they are doing. At least they are making no progress in terms of productivity. The per capita load that each worker carrying per day is around 12 tons per day. But as per his simple calculations, they could at least carry per day at least 24 tons, double the output each fellow is capable of. So when he went into the reason why these workers are deliberately stalling any improvement in the productivity, he found that one is there is always some kind of antagonism between workers and the management. That is one thing. Second thing is there is a kind of insecurity in the workers' life. That means if the the workers there, they reasoned out, if they increase the productivity, some of them will be automatically declared as surplus, and they may be kicked out of the company and they may be out of job. So they were adopting a strategy called soldiering. Soldiering means you try to action and give a impression to the management that beyond this can't increase the production. So even supervisors or foremen who are supposed to be boss of them, they were also helpless because they are at the mercy of the workers. Because even the supervisors, they don't know how to measure what is the honest day work. So what Taylor did, no? Because he is a genius and his mind is always working, so he approached the management. He's saying that see, at the past few years there is no increase in productivity of our workers because there is a kind of there is no scientific analysis of the work because they lack the knowledge. So everyone is at the mercy of the worker. Like whatever he does, we are taking that as granted. And he had some kind of, see, already he is using a lot of scientific methods to develop this HSS tool, this estimating the tool life, through experimentation. So he said, like, whatever the experimental process that he is using in this HSS tool or tool life equation, I can apply the same thing for the worker, changing various parameters of the situation. Like, for example, in the development of HSS tools, you might have started with, say, 25% tungsten, maybe 10% chromium, and 5% vanadium or molybdenum, like whatever. Finally, after a lot of experimentation, using these HSS tools for till they get blunt, that's why he ended up using 300 tons to get this kind of results, optimal result. So 18:1, to get that 18:1 optimal combination, which maximizes the tool life of a cutting tool, he had to do a lot of experimentation. He said, like, similarly in management also, he is of the belief that for every job in an industry, there is always one of the responsibilities of the management is to find out for every job what is the best way of doing it. And to find out that best way of doing it, he said like, you do a bit of try with the different ways of doing the same job and select a job which is simpler, faster, and which is easy for the workers to implement. The same thing, whatever approach he has used to develop HSS tool, he has used in the analysis of work of a worker. And his objective in that is, his assumption is that to do any human work, there is one best way of doing it. And as a foreman, you have to find out what is the best way of doing that through experimentation. Say, for example, in his case, what Taylor did is, like, he took the analysis of the work of workers who are transferring various materials, like the wagon used to come to Midwell Steel Company with iron load, and then limestone, and then wheat husk. And as he has found that the average output of a worker is only 12 tons per day, which is far lower than what they could do. So what he did is, he approached the management saying that, can you spare a Dutch worker? Can you spare a good worker who is well motivated and who will perfectly obey his instructions? So what Taylor, then the management searched out of their workers. They spared one Dutch worker who is well motivated. America is a nation of immigrants. So this Dutch worker, why we are calling him a Dutch worker? Because he is an immigrant who has come from Poland or Netherlands, who is a Dutch nationality. So it seems this Dutch worker is in the process of building his own house. So he was desperate to maximize his income. And here Taylor promised that Dutch worker that you will get I will give you 30-40% extra wages to you. But only the condition is, whatever I say, you implement. You do. So what Taylor did is, he took the Dutch worker and he started experimenting on that guy. Like, what is the optimal weight this worker can carry throughout the day consistently? He started putting weights like 10 lbs, 20 lbs, 30 lbs, 40 lbs, and he was asked to walk at a certain pace. So after experimenting on that guy with different weights, he found that a Dutch worker can comfortably carry, without straining himself, he can carry 24 lbs of weight per day consistently. That means 10 kgs in the. So this 10 kgs he found. Once he has found this, that 10 kgs is the optimal weight. See, he is not interested in the weightlifter who lifts around 150 kg, but he can't hold it more than 10 seconds. He is not interested. Like, he wants to know what is the weight a worker can consistently carry for 8-hour shift. That is the point. So once he got this basic information that any worker can carry 10 kg of load without any issue, then what he did is, the next step Taylor followed is that to design a tool for each of the materials that the workers are handling. So, for example, they were using shovels. In olden days, steam engines, coal-fired steam engines. They use a lot of shovels to put the coal into the engine, no? So
Yes, sir.
what this Taylor did is to he started designing one kind of shovel for one kind of material. Like he ended up designing a smaller shovel for workers who are lifting pig iron, a slightly bigger for limestone, a very big shovel for lifting wheat husk. So then he told each of then what he did is he, through experimentation with that on that Dutch worker, he found like what is the best physical postures the worker should execute while lifting the load. Like one of the recommendations he ended up giving to the workers is don't use your back muscles, but you use your thigh muscles. Because thigh muscles are stronger than back muscles. Because most of the time what we do now, when we end up picking some object that is on the floor, we bend our back. But actually we don't use our thigh muscles. So by changing the postures, style of posture, by changing the tools, what he found in Dutch worker is that he is capable of transferring 47.5 tons per day. Where is 12 tons per day to? He has increased that fellow's productivity to 47.5 tons by just changing the tool, by finding out the optimal weight a worker can lift per day, and a scientific analysis of the work postures. He ended up maximizing the Dutch workers' productivity, raising the Dutch workers' productivity from 12 tons per day to 47.5 tons per day. But whereas, so anyway, Taylor, what he's a man of bit of judgment. He said, like, anyway, this Dutch worker is a superhuman guy. I can't expect every normal worker to work at that pace. He said, like, he factored in and said, like, 45 tons per day is reasonably a good target for every normal worker who has the necessary physical stamina. Okay, so what happened is Taylor, with this analysis, with this scientific analysis approach too. So as I told you, his basic philosophy is for every job there is one best way of doing it, and as an executive of that company, you should find out through experimentation what is the best way of doing that particular job. Select a one which is simpler, easier, and not heavily taxing the worker. So, and what happened now? Then he moved the issue to next stage. What is that next stage? He said, like, you connect the amount of work a worker does per day to the amount of wages he does, wages he earns. Like, for example, if a worker is delivering 45 tons per day, you give him normal wages. If he is delivering 47.5 tons, you pay him extra bonus. That is, say, 20% or 30%. Similarly, like who does less than 45 tons, say 43, 40, then accordingly you correct his wages. Or probably maybe he's not fitting into that particular job description. Probably you might have to transfer him to some other department where he's more comfortable. So because lifting materials is not an everybody's job, no? So here what happened is, you can say, like, he said, like, he developed a scientific basis for wages. How to fix the wages for a worker. To fix that wages scientifically, he said, like, first of all, the supervisor or the man who is in charge of that work, he should do a bit of experimentation, just like you do in any scientific investigation. See, even in scientific investigation, You have to do experimentation. You can't say like I have sixth sense and this is the result. If you want to say like cigarette smoking is injurious to health, how you can issue that statement unless you do some kind of experimentation, right? You take a control crowd and then experimental crowd, and then you subject them to one experimental group. You subject them to smoking and no smoking, and you see like after you study for say 5 years and see like if there are any extraordinary instances of cancer in the guys who are smoking, do that way. You can't say like yeah, my hunch says like this. So similarly, Taylor, why he ended up doing this is he has the like he says like one of the assumptions he made is basically every man is an economic man. Economic man means everyone tries to maximize their money, earn money. They want to earn money, like just like that Dutch worker, because he's in the process of building his own house. It seems every penny used to for him. He used to interpret it as a big dollar. Every cent is very important to him because he want to gather that entire money and build his own house. After all, he has migrated from Poland not for relaxing, here. So in the process, what Taylor assumed is that if you can connect scientifically the amount of work to the amount of money each worker earns scientifically, then you can run the every industry on an autopilot basis. First of all, find out the scientifically what is the amount of work a worker can do, a normal worker, and fix the wages based on that normal worker. And whoever is achieving more than the target value, to encourage him or to give some kind of reward, he said like you pay extra bonus. And whoever is not doing as per that standard, pay less. But to decide that standard, what Taylor said is you have to do a bit of homework in the form of trying out different ways of doing the same work and selecting a work which is simpler, faster, and then less taxing on the worker. So that because after all, worker has to spend 8 hours per day on the shop floor. He should be consistent in his performance. So what happened is once Taylor has developed this scientific management, it proved to be very, very important input. Every industry. Even though he developed for a steel plant, particularly in the loading and unloading, but it ended up, in fact, like this scientific analysis of work, human work, in fact, helped our other hero, that is Henry Ford. Because when he was minutely analyzing the work of each worker who is sitting on the mass production line, like how much amount of work I can assign to a worker if he has to complete his portion in say 30 seconds. So Henry Ford used a lot of Taylor's methodology to decide scientifically how much amount of work a worker can work in that 30-second slot that is allocated to every worker who is sitting along the production line. So in that way, Henry Ford could judiciously divide the work among the assembly line workers. So that is the so in a way, if America has become a great country subsequently in terms of per capita income, it is the people like Taylor, because whatever the scientific way of analyzing human work has helped all the other guys. In fact, it helped Henry Fayol also to judicially divide the work. It helped Henry Ford. It helped Frank Gilbert in his motion studies. Right? So that's why we have given that title. See, subsequently, anyway, see, we have there are a few drawbacks of Taylor's scientific management. So, see, we will discuss when there is an appropriate occasion to discuss that. See, broadly, what the Taylor's scientific management says is, for every human job in a industry, for every job that where humans are involved, you have to find out what is the best way of completing it. And there is only one best way of doing it. Find out that through experimentation, standardize it, and then time it, and then pay as per that standard time. If somebody is able to deliver more amount of work within the given time, reward him by paying more. Because in Taylor's time, everyone is desperate for earning more money. Because they have come all the way from Europe to settle in America, and they have to build their own house afresh. There is no ancestral property to develop. They have to start their career on an empty slate. So similarly, only what Taylor thought is this scientific analysis of a job is a one-time affair, but subsequently another great man, another American by name Edward Deming said, developing a standard thing is not a one-time affair. It is a continuous affair. That is the only difference. But anyway, for all these people, the starting point is the Taylor's scientific management. So subsequently, Henry Ford, to scientifically analyze the amount of work a worker can contribute in a given time, he has used the Taylor's principles. Similarly, Frank Gilbert also ended up using a lot of Taylor's style of management. And anyway, for Taylor, coming to Henry Fayol, you can say he is the man who brought in some kind of structure to this subject of management. You and me are discussing this subject of management. It is because of Henry Fayol's contribution of. So he has brought in a structure of management, Henry Fayol. And coming to Henry Fayol, he is a French mining engineer, and he is successful throughout his life. Actually, to tell you another dark side of Taylor, Taylor, he was not a very successful man throughout his life. At the fag end of his life, in fact, not fag end, in the middle of his life, actually, what happened is in that Bethlehem Steel Company, workers went for strike, and one of the conditions they have put is this: Taylor has to be kicked out of that company because he couldn't withstand his pressure. Finally, Taylor could settle in his career as a consultant because no company is ready to take Taylor as an employee because there is a lot of rumor on saying that this Taylor's scientific management is nothing but it is a misnomer for exploiting the workers. Some kind of bad word started propagating about scientific management, and no company was ready to take Taylor as an employee. So ultimately, Taylor has settled as a consultant. But actually, truly speaking, actually it is a good method to analyze human work. Here and there, some bad cases may be there, who have made a very conservative estimates of work. But in fact, like none other than V.I. Lenin has endorsed scientific management, Taylor's scientific management. You said like that is a very good tool. Even in Soviet Union, Lenin means he is the man who led the Russian Revolution. He gave a very good clean sheet to Taylor's scientific management, saying that this is a good tool because it will systemize the human work. But unfortunately, workers sometimes they felt overwhelmed by this toughness of Taylor because Taylor is a bit arrogant guy. When he is of the opinion that saying that like workers doesn't have mind, workers doesn't have the ideas. Only engineers or foremen are capable of getting good ideas. So what that in fact like Taylor was so you can say Taylor was so adamant or he has a lot of so much high ego every time he has so
Pride
much
in engineers,
huh?
pride in innovators, sir. Pride.
Yeah, probably because of his innovation. So he was a bit arrogant, and then what happened? In fact, he used to cut a lot of bad jokes on workers. Say if some worker comes to him saying that, "Sir, this can be done this way," he used to sarcastically remark, saying that when you are hanging your hat outside, you hang your brain there. He is saying like, see, giving ideas is his domain, whereas executing it is workers' job. So what happened that indifference to workers has led to a lot of communication gap between workers and the Taylor, and ultimately made them to hate this guy. And ultimately it led to even making him kick out of that plant, Bethlehem Steel plant. Finally, he settled as a consultant. Whereas if you take Henry Fayol, it is the other way. Henry Fayol is successful throughout his life, and he is the man who was, as a director of French mining industry, he pulled that industry out of red. It was in losses, and he made it profitable. And when people have asked him, like, what kind of techniques you have used to pull that French mining industry out of red, he came up with this 14 principles of management and what should be the functions of any management, which is managing an enterprise. So in that way, Henry Fayol came up with the principles of management, which ultimately gave the structure to the subject of management. Whereas Taylor was concentrating on shop floor practices and how to improve productivity at the shop floor level, whereas Henry Fayol was more on the higher level, at top level. So anyway, we will discuss in the next class this Henry Fayol's 14 principles of management. And by the way, like tomorrow, I'm not taking this class, tomorrow's class because I'm on leave. So again, we will meet on next Tuesday, probably by consulting our what is CR Kalyan, probably we can compensate tomorrow class at some other time. Okay.
Okay.
Sorry,